The September sun beat down on downtown Los Angeles with that particular intensity that turns luxury car interiors into ovens. Marcus Webb adjusted his Rolex, feeling the weight of it against his wrist as he maneuvered his silver Porsche 911 Carrera through the congested streets of the financial district. The leather seats, still cool from the air conditioning, creaked softly as he shifted his weight, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. Everything about his appearance screamed success. The tailored Tom Ford suit, the precisely groomed hair with just enough grey at the temples to suggest wisdom without age, the confident set of his jaw. At 42, Marcus had conquered the world of investment banking. His corner office on the 35th floor of the Sterling Tower overlooked the sprawling city like a throne room, and he treated it as such. The Porsche wasn't just transportation, it was a statement, a rolling trophy that announced his arrival wherever he went. He'd worked 70-hour weeks for 15 years to afford this lifestyle, and he wore his achievements like armor. "Marcus Webb calling," he said into his Bluetooth headset, his voice carrying that particular pitch of impatience reserved for people who believe their time is more valuable than others. "I need the Henderson portfolio numbers before the market closes. I don't care if Sarah's in a meeting. Get her out." The traffic light ahead turned red, and Marcus slowed to a stop, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. To his left, a homeless man pushed a shopping cart filled with aluminum cans. Marcus looked away quickly, reaching instead for his phone to check his stock portfolio. Up another 3%. Everything was going according to plan. That's when he felt it. A subtle vibration in the steering wheel, a slight pull to the right that hadn't been there this morning. Marcus frowned, his perfectionist nature immediately alert to the imperfection. He accelerated when the light changed, and the vibration intensified, accompanied now by a faint grinding sound that made him wince. "Damn it," he muttered, disconnecting his call mid-sentence. Whatever this was, it couldn't wait. The Porsche was due for a presentation to potential clients tomorrow morning, part of his carefully cultivated image. He needed it perfect. Marcus pulled up his GPS, searching for the nearest Porsche dealership. The closest authorized service center was in Beverly Hills, 45 minutes. Away in this traffic. He checked his watch, already 4:30 p.m. They'd be closing soon, his jaw clenched with frustration. Then he noticed it. Rodriguez Auto Repair, all makes and models, 0.3 miles. Marcus hesitated. He'd never taken his Porsche to an independent shop. The very thought felt like a betrayal of the vehicle's pedigree. But the grinding sound was getting worse, and he had the Henderson meeting at 7 a.m. sharp. There was no time for the dealership today. "Fine," he said to himself, making a sharp right turn that made the Porsche's tires squeal against the pavement. "But they better know what they're doing." Rodriguez Auto Repair sat wedged between a laundromat and a taco stand on a street that looked like it hadn't seen an urban renewal project in 30 years. The building's faded blue paint was peeling in long strips, revealing older layers of green and yellow underneath. A hand-painted sign hung slightly crooked above the bay doors, and the asphalt parking lot was cracked and patched with mismatched tar. Marcus pulled in slowly, his Porsche looking absurdly out of place among the aging Hondas and Ford pickups that surrounded the shop. The grinding sound had become a persistent whine now, making him increasingly anxious despite his irritation at the surroundings. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, surveying the scene through his tinted windows. The shop's interior was dimly lit, tools scattered across workbenches in what looked like organized chaos. A classic rock station played from somewhere inside, and he could see the silhouettes of two figures working on a lifted truck. With a resigned sigh, Marcus stepped out of the Porsche, careful to avoid a puddle of what he hoped was water near his door. The late afternoon heat hit him immediately, and he could feel his shirt beginning to stick to his back under his suit jacket. The air smelled of motor oil, hot asphalt, and the spices from the taco stand next door, a far cry from the climate-controlled luxury of his usual haunts. "Hello," he called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone accustomed to immediate service. "Is anyone actually working here?" The music lowered, and one of the figures emerged from behind the truck. Marcus blinked in surprise. She was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face was smudged with grease, and she wore worn denim coveralls over a grey tank top that had seen better days. Her hands, wrapped in fingerless mechanic's gloves, held a large wrench like it weighed nothing. But what struck Marcus most were her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and currently assessing him with the same scrutiny he was giving her surroundings. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice pleasant but professional, with just a hint of a Brooklyn accent that suggested she'd moved west at some point. Marcus gestured toward his Porsche with a wave that somehow managed to be both casual and proprietary. "I need someone to look at my car. It's making a grinding noise, pulling to the right." The woman wiped her hands on a rag tucked into her belt and walked over, her boots crunching on the gravel. She circled the Porsche slowly, her eyes scanning the vehicle with practiced ease. Marcus watched her, feeling a strange mixture of defensiveness and curiosity. There was something about the way she moved, confident, purposeful, completely unself-conscious about the grease stains or the strand of hair that had escaped her. "Ponytail. Beautiful car," she said, running her hand along the hood without quite touching it. 2023, Carrera, right? You keep it clean." "Obviously," Marcus replied, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "The question is whether you can fix it properly. This isn't some Honda Civic." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, maybe, or recognition of a type she'd encountered before. "I'm aware. Mind if I take it for a quick test drive?" "Need to hear." "What you're hearing." Marcus hesitated. The thought of this grease-covered stranger behind the wheel of his Porsche made his chest tighten. But the grinding sound chose that moment to echo in his memory, and he reluctantly pulled the keys from his pocket. "Fine," he said, holding them just out of her reach for a moment, "but I'm coming with you." "Suit yourself." She took the keys, and Marcus caught a glimpse of scarred knuckles and calloused palms. The hands of someone who actually worked for a living, he thought, with a mixture of disdain and something he couldn't quite name. He climbed into the passenger seat, immediately uncomfortable with the role reversal. She adjusted the driver's seat forward. She was shorter than him, and took a moment to familiarize herself with the controls. Her movements were careful, respectful even, and Marcus felt his defensiveness ease slightly. "I'm Elena, by the way," she said, starting the engine with a smooth turn of the key. "Elena Rodriguez. This is my shop." "Marcus," he replied curtly, not offering his last name. Eleanor pulled out of the parking lot and onto the street, accelerating smoothly. She drove well, Marcus noted grudgingly, confident but not reckless, taking the Porsche through its gears with an ease that suggested familiarity with high-performance vehicles. They drove for about 3 blocks before she made a right turn, and there it was. The grinding sound, clear and unmistakable. "Hear that?" Marcus asked unnecessarily. "Yeah," Elena said, her brow furrowed in concentration. She made another turn, testing the car's response. "Sounds like your front right brake caliper is sticking. Could also be the rotor if it's been grinding long enough. When did you first notice it?" "This afternoon," Marcus admitted. "It wasn't there this morning." Elena nodded, pulling back into the shop's parking lot. "Lucky you caught it early. If you'd driven on it much longer, you'd be looking at serious rotor damage, maybe even brake line." "Issues." She parked the Porsche back in its original spot and climbed out, already moving toward the shop's bay. "Let me get it up on the lift. Take a proper look." Marcus followed her inside, his expensive shoes clicking on the oil-stained concrete floor. The shop's interior was more organized than he'd expected, with tools arranged on shadow boards and parts catalogued in clear bins. Still, it was a far cry from the pristine service bays of the Beverly Hills Porsche dealership, with their white floors and technicians in spotless uniforms. Elena grabbed a floor jack and positioned it under the Porsche with practiced efficiency. "You want to wait in the office? There's coffee, though I warn you it's been sitting since this morning." "I'll watch," Marcus said, crossing his arms. He didn't trust anyone with his car, especially not in a place like this. Elena shrugged and began jacking up the car. Another figure emerged from the back, a heavy-set Latino man in his 60s with kind eyes, and hands even more weathered than Elena's. "This is my father, Carlos," Elena said, not looking up from her work. "Dad, this is Marcus, Porsche with a sticking caliper." Carlos nodded at Marcus with a warm smile that Marcus didn't return. "Beautiful machine," he said, his accent heavier than his daughter's. "Elena, she's good with the German cars. You're in good hands." Marcus doubted that, but said nothing. Elena removed the front right wheel with quick, efficient movements, and even Marcus could see the problem once the brake assembly was exposed. The caliper was seized, and the rotor showed early signs of scoring. "Yeah, definitely the caliper," Eleanor said, pulling out her phone to snap a photo. She showed it to Marcus, pointing out the issues with the grease-stained screen. "See how the piston isn't retracting properly? And these grooves in the rotor, that's from the pad dragging. We can rebuild the caliper, replace the rotor, and you'll be good as new." "How long?" Marcus demanded. Elena checked her watch. "It's almost 5 now. Parts store closes at 6. If they have what I need in stock, I can have you out of here by 7:30. 7:30? Marcus's voice rose. "I have a dinner meeting tonight." "Then you should probably call the dealership and see if they can take you right now," Elena replied evenly, lowering the car back down. "But I'm guessing they're already closed or booked up, or you wouldn't be here." Marcus pulled out his phone, his jaw tight. She was right, of course. He'd already checked. The dealership couldn't see him until next week. "Fine," he bit out. "Do it. But I need it perfect, not good enough. Perfect." Elena met his eyes steadily. "I don't do work that isn't perfect, Marcus. That's why this shop's been here for 30 years. She turned to her father, switching to rapid Spanish that Marcus couldn't follow. Carlos nodded and headed to a battered pickup truck in the corner. "Dad's going to grab the parts. You can wait. In the office if you want. Like I said, coffee's there and there's a TV." Marcus glanced toward the small office visible through a window. Cluttered desk, ancient filing cabinets, a coffee maker that looked like it predated the Reagan administration. He shook his head. "I'll wait here." "Suit yourself." Eleanor pulled out a creeper and slid under the Porsche, her voice echoing from beneath the chassis. "Might be a while. The waiting's the hardest part, they say." Marcus leaned against a workbench, pulled out his phone and tried to focus on his emails, but he found his attention drawn to Elena as she worked. She moved with a fluid confidence, her hands sure and steady as she disconnected brake lines and removed the damaged caliper. Despite himself, Marcus was impressed by her competence, though he'd never admit it. The office phone rang, and Elena slid out from under the car, leaving grease marks on the floor. "Rodriguez Auto," she answered, tucking the phone against her shoulder as she wiped her hands. "Hey, Mrs. Chen. Yeah, the Honda's ready. You can pick it up tomorrow morning." She hung up and caught Marcus watching her. For a moment, their eyes met, and Marcus felt an unexpected spark of something. Curiosity, maybe, or respect for someone who clearly knew their craft. Then his phone rang. His assistant's name flashed on the screen, and reality crashed back. He was Marcus Webb, investment banker, standing in a dingy garage, waiting for a filthy mechanic to fix his Porsche. The absurdity of it all suddenly overwhelmed his patience. "Sarah," he answered curtly, turning away from Eleanor. "Tell Henderson we're moving the meeting to 7:30. Something came up." As he talked, giving orders and demanding reports, Marcus missed the way Elena's expression shifted, the brief glimpse of respect in her eyes fading to something cooler, more distant. She slid back under the Porsche without a word, and the shop filled with the sound of tools against metal, drowning out his voice. The evening was just beginning, and neither of them knew that the next few hours would change everything. The city hummed around them, indifferent, massive, full of stories unfolding in parallel. But in that small shop on that forgotten street, two worlds were about to collide in ways Marcus couldn't imagine. The grinding sound that had brought him here was only the beginning. The fluorescent lights of Rodriguez Auto Repair flickered slightly as evening settled over Los Angeles. Marcus checked his watch for the 15th time in 10 minutes, 6:45 p.m. Carlos still hadn't returned with the parts, and Elena continued working on his Porsche with what Marcus considered infuriating calm. She'd moved on to inspecting the other brake assemblies, her movements methodical and unhurried. "Does your father always take this long?" Marcus asked, unable to keep the irritation from his voice. He'd cancelled 2 calls and postponed his dinner meeting. The Henderson portfolio could wait, but his patience couldn't. Elena slid out from under the car, a smudge of grease now decorating her left cheek. "Traffic in LA at rush hour. You're familiar with the concept?" The sarcasm was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I'm familiar with the concept of efficiency, which seems to be in short supply here." "Efficiency requires the right parts," Elena replied, pushing herself to her feet with one fluid motion. "We could slap on whatever's closest and get you out of here faster if that's what you want, but I'm guessing you'd rather have it done right." She had him there, and Marcus hated that she knew it. He watched as she walked to a workbench, consulting what looked like a well-worn manual for Porsche specifications. Her coveralls were smudged with grease and dirt, her tank top underneath damp with sweat from the heat of the shop. Everything about her screamed working class, blue collar, worlds away from the polished professionals Marcus surrounded himself with. "I've been bringing my Porsche to certified dealerships for 3 years, Marcus said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "They have clean facilities, trained technicians, proper equipment. No offense, but this place looks like it barely meets code." Eleanor looked up from her manual, and Marcus saw something flash in her eyes. Hurt, maybe, quickly masked by steel. "None taken," she said flatly. "Though I'm curious why you're here if the dealerships are so superior." "Desperation," Marcus said without thinking, "and poor timing." The word hung in the air between them. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed her shoulders stiffen slightly. She closed the manual with more force than necessary and turned back to the Porsche. "Well, desperate or not, you're getting the same quality work anyone else would get here," she said, her voice professionally neutral again. "My dad and I rebuilt this shop from nothing after he immigrated from Mexico 32 years ago. We've worked on everything from beat-up Civics to Ferraris. We might not have marble floors, but we know what we're doing." Something in her tone made Marcus uncomfortable, a quiet dignity that his words had trampled. But before he could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was Mitchell, his managing partner. "Webb, where are you?" Mitchell's voice boomed through the speaker. "Henderson's asking questions. He wants to move forward, but he needs confidence." "In the numbers." Marcus stepped outside into the parking lot, where the noise of the street provided some privacy. "I'm handling it, Mitchell. Sarah has the portfolio breakdown." "Sarah isn't you," Mitchell interrupted. "Henderson specifically requested you for this deal. If you can't close it, I'll find someone who can." The threat was thinly veiled. Marcus felt the familiar pressure in his chest, the constant weight of proving himself, of maintaining his position in the cutthroat world of high finance. He'd built his reputation on being available, reliable, the man who never said no. And here he was, stuck in a rundown auto shop because of a mechanical failure. "I'll be there," Marcus said firmly. "Give me 2 hours. You have 90 minutes. Henderson's flying to Singapore tonight." The call ended. Marcus stood in the parking lot, loosening his tie with one hand. The taco stand next door had opened for dinner, and the smell of carne asada filled the evening air. A young couple laughed as they ordered, completely carefree. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd felt that weightless. He walked back into the shop to find Elena replacing his Porsche's wheel. "Your father's back?" he asked, hope lifting his voice. 5 minutes ago, Elena said without looking up. Calipers rebuilt, new rotors on, brake fluids flushed, just buttoning it up now. Marcus felt a wave of relief that immediately turned to suspicion. That fast? You're sure it's done right? Elena stopped what she was doing and stood, wiping her hands on her rag. When she looked at him, her expression was completely professional, but her eyes were cold. Mr. Marcus, I've been working on cars since I was 8 years old. My father taught me everything he knows, and he learned from the best mechanics in Mexico City. I went to community college for automotive technology, graduated top of my class, and I've been running this shop for 5 years, since Dad's arthritis got too bad for the detail. Work. She gestured around the shop. Yeah, we don't have fancy waiting rooms or complimentary espresso. We can't afford to renovate because we give fair prices to people in this neighborhood who can barely afford to keep their cars running. But I guarantee you that every car that leaves this shop is safe, reliable, and fixed correctly. So yes, I'm sure it's done right. The speech was delivered without raising her voice, but every word landed like a hammer. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck, embarrassment mixed with anger at being lectured by someone he'd dismissed as beneath him. I'm just saying that for what I'm paying, he started. You haven't paid anything yet, Elena interrupted, and you won't until you're satisfied. Take it for a test drive. If anything feels wrong, bring it back and I'll fix it free of charge. She pulled out an invoice. The total is $380. That includes parts, labor, and the after-hours fee for rushing it. Marcus blinked. That's it? Were you expecting more? The dealership quoted me $200 for similar work last year. Elena shrugged. Dealerships have higher overhead. We don't. She handed him the keys. Want to take that test drive? Marcus took the keys, their fingers briefly touching. Her hands were rough with calluses, warm from work. He found himself oddly reluctant to look away from her face, the sharp intelligence in her brown eyes, the firm set of her jaw, the small scar above her left eyebrow that suggested a story he'd never know. Fine, he said, breaking the moment. Let's see if it's actually fixed. They climbed into the Porsche again, the roles unchanged from before. This time, Elena didn't make small talk. She drove in silence, taking the car through the same route as before, then extending it to the freeway entrance. The car handled perfectly, smooth, responsive, no grinding, no pulling. Satisfied? She asked after 10 minutes, her tone carefully neutral. Marcus wanted to find fault, but he couldn't. The Porsche drove like new, better than new, actually. The brake response was more precise than he remembered. It's adequate, he said, hating how petulant he sounded. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the only sign of her frustration. They drove back to the shop in silence. The evening had deepened into full night, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Inside the shop, Carlos was cleaning up, his movements slow and careful. Elena parked the Porsche and got out. Without a word. Marcus followed, pulling out his wallet. You take credit cards? Yeah. Elena walked to the ancient computer at the front desk, her movements stiff. As Marcus handed over his black American Express card, a small flex he couldn't resist. He noticed a framed photo on the desk. It showed a younger Elena, maybe 12 or 13, standing next to Carlos in front of the shop. Both wore matching coveralls and huge smiles. The shop's sign in the background was newly painted, bright and hopeful. That was opening day, Carlos said, noticing Marcus's gaze. His English was slower than Elena's, more careful. My little girl, she wanted to work with me even then. Said she would make this the best shop in Los Angeles. Marcus looked from the photo to Elena, who was deliberately not meeting his eyes as she processed the payment. He suddenly saw the shop differently, not as a dingy garage, but as a dream realized, a family legacy built by hand. Sign here, Elena said, sliding the receipt across the desk. Marcus signed, then hesitated. Some instinct, conscience maybe, or delayed recognition of his own behavior made him clear his throat. "Look, about what I said earlier. Your card's being declined," Eleanor interrupted, staring at the computer screen. "What?" Marcus leaned over to look. Sure enough, the transaction had been rejected. "That's impossible. Try it again." Eleanor ran the card twice more, both times declined. A cold feeling settled in Marcus's stomach. "Let me call the bank." He stepped outside again, dialing his bank's emergency line. After navigating through the automated system and finally reaching a human, the answer came through with devastating clarity. His account had been frozen, pending an investigation into unusual activity. "What unusual activity?" Marcus demanded. "I'm not at liberty to discuss details, sir. You'll need to visit a branch in person to resolve this. The branches are closed. I need access to my account now." "I understand your frustration, sir, but—" Marcus hung up. He stood in the parking lot, the LA skyline glittering in the distance, and felt something crack inside him. The weight of the day, the car trouble, the rushed repair, Mitchell's threat, and now this, suddenly became too much. His carefully controlled life was slipping through his fingers. He walked back inside, his carefully cultivated confidence completely gone. Elena looked up from the desk, reading his expression immediately. "Problem?" she asked. "My account's been frozen," Marcus said, the words tasting like defeat. "Some kind of fraud investigation. I can't access any of my cards until I go to the bank tomorrow." Eleanor's expression didn't change. "So you can't pay?" "I can pay," Marcus said quickly. "Just not right this second. I'll come by tomorrow morning with cash." "Or you could Venmo me," Elena said simply. "Or Zelle, or PayPal. Whatever works." Marcus pulled out his phone, opening his banking app. Of course, that was frozen. 2. Everything linked to his accounts inaccessible. He looked at Elena, then at Carlos, then back at Elena, feeling utterly powerless. "I have $60 in cash in my wallet," he said quietly. "That's all I have on me." The silence that followed was excruciating. Marcus waited for Elena to explode, to call him a liar or worse. He'd have believed it too. What kind of man drives a Porsche but can't pay a $380 repair bill? Instead, Elena surprised him. She closed her laptop and shrugged. "Then I guess you owe me $320. "Just like that?" Marcus said. "You're going to trust me to come back?" Elena met his eyes steadily. "You know where to find me, and I've got your license plate. But honestly," she gestured to his suit, his watch, the Porsche sitting in the bay. "Yeah, I think you're good for it." The simple trust in her words was more humiliating than any accusation could have been. Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed the $60 on the desk. "I'll be back tomorrow morning. First thing. We open at 8, Elena said. Marcus nodded, collected his keys, and walked to his Porsche. As he opened the door, he turned back. Elena was already helping her father shut down the shop, moving with the easy rhythm of long familiarity. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, but somehow they both looked dignified, more dignified than Marcus felt in his $1,000 suit. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. Elena looked over, surprised by his sincerity. For a moment, her expression softened. "Drive safe, Marcus." He got in the Porsche and started the engine, smooth, perfect, quiet. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he caught a glimpse of Eleanor in his rearview mirror. She stood in the bay door, wiping her hands on her rag, watching him leave. Marcus drove toward his expensive apartment in West Hollywood, but his mind stayed in that small shop. He thought about Elena's scarred hands, her father's kind eyes, the way they'd trusted him despite every reason not to. He thought about the words he'd used, desperate, filthy, inadequate, and felt shame burning in his chest. The Porsche's brake pedal responded perfectly to his touch, and Marcus realized something. Elena Rodriguez had done more than fix his car. She'd held up a mirror, and he didn't like what he saw reflected there. Tomorrow morning couldn't come fast enough. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in his king-sized bed in his minimalist apartment, staring at the ceiling as the city lights filtered through his floor-to-ceiling windows. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely and sat at his desk, his laptop casting a blue glow across his face. His bank account remained frozen, his calls to emergency support yielding nothing but promises that it would be resolved during business hours. He drafted and deleted 3 different emails to Mitchell, each trying to explain why he'd missed the Henderson meeting. None of them felt adequate. The truth was embarrassing. He'd let a mechanical problem derail the most important deal of his quarter. In the cutthroat world of investment banking, such weaknesses were unforgivable. At 6 a.m., Marcus showered and dressed, choosing a simple button-down and slacks instead of his usual armor of suits. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man staring back, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped with exhaustion, the confident set of his jaw replaced by something uncertain. The bank opened at 7 a.m. Marcus was there at 6:50, first in line, his foot tapping impatiently against the marble floor. When the manager finally reviewed his account, the news was both better and worse than expected. The freeze was a mistake, triggered by an unusual pattern of international transfers related to the Henderson deal. It would be lifted immediately, but the apology came with a warning. "You should be more careful about your transaction patterns, Mr. Webb. These flags exist for your protection." Protection. The word rang hollow. What protected him from his own arrogance? By 7:45 a.m., Marcus was back in his Porsche, heading toward Rodriguez Auto Repair with 4 crisp $100 bills in his wallet. The morning traffic was already building, but he barely noticed. His mind kept replaying yesterday's events, particularly the moment he'd called Elena filthy. The word tasted toxic in his memory. He'd never thought of himself as cruel. Demanding, yes. Exacting, certainly, but not cruel. Yet what? Else could you call the way he'd dismissed Elena's skill, her dignity, her family's legacy? He'd seen her grease-stained coveralls and immediately judged her as less than him, never considering the expertise required to diagnose and fix a complex German engine in under 2 hours. Rodriguez Auto Repair looked different in the morning light. The building was still worn, the paint still peeling, but Marcus noticed things he'd missed before. The meticulously organized tool racks visible through the bay doors, the neat landscaping of cacti and succulents along the front wall, the hand-painted mural on the side of the building depicting a family of mechanics across 3 generations. Elena's pickup truck, an old Ford F-150 that had seen better days, was already parked in the lot. Through the bay window, Marcus could see her working on a Honda Accord, her movements as precise and confident as yesterday. Carlos sat in the office, reading what looked like a Spanish-language newspaper. Marcus parked and sat for a moment, gathering his courage. This should be simple. Walk in, pay the bill, leave. But something about facing Elena again made his chest tight. He'd wronged her, and he knew it. He got out of the Porsche and walked toward the shop. The same smell of motor oil and hot asphalt greeted him, but it didn't seem unpleasant anymore. Just honest, a smell of real work done by real hands. "Morning," Elena said without looking up from the Honda's engine. "You're early. Told you we opened at 8. I wanted to catch you," Marcus said, pulling out his wallet, "before you got busy." Elena straightened, wiping her hands on her rag. She looked tired too, Marcus noticed, dark circles matching his own. "Account situation sorted out." "Bank error," Marcus said. "All fixed." He held out $400 bills. "For the repair. Keep the change." Elena took the money, counted it carefully, then walked to the cash register in the office. She returned with a 20, which she held. Out to him. "Change is $20. We charge what we charge." "Keep it," Marcus insisted. "Consider it an apology tip." "For what?" Elena's eyes were guarded. Marcus took a breath. This was harder than any boardroom negotiation he'd ever faced. "For yesterday. For the way I acted. What I said about your shop, about it being desperate to come here. That was out of line." Elena studied him for a long moment. "Yeah," she said finally. "It was." The blunt acknowledgement stung more than any angry response. "Would have." Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I was stressed and I took it out on you. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth." "Stressed," Eleanor repeated, a slight edge to her voice. "Right. Must be hard, driving that Porsche around, wearing that watch, living whatever life you live up in your fancy part of town." The sarcasm was gentle, but it landed hard. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck. "I've worked hard for what I have." "So have I," Eleanor said quietly. "So has my father. But I bet nobody ever looks at you and assumes you don't know what you're doing just because of where you work or how you look." The truth of it struck Marcus like a physical blow. She was right, of course. From the moment he'd walked into this shop, he'd made assumptions based on appearances. The worn building, Elena's grease-stained clothes, the old equipment. He'd never questioned his own expertise in the boardroom, never considered that maybe competence came in forms he didn't recognize. "You're right," he said simply. "I judged you and I was completely wrong. The work you did yesterday was impeccable, better than any dealership I've been to." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Okay," she said. "Apology accepted, though I'm still not taking your extra 20. She held out the bill again, and this time Marcus took it. Their fingers touched briefly, his soft and manicured, hers calloused and strong. The contrast seemed to symbolize everything between them. "How long have you been running this place?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with the question. Elena glanced at her father, who was now watching them with undisguised interest. 5 years officially, but I've been working here my whole life. Dad's arthritis got bad after he turned 60. He can still do consulting, diagnostics, the lighter work, but the heavy lifting, the detail work, that's all me now. That's a lot of responsibility." "It's family," Eleanor said with a shrug. "That's what you do. Family." Marcus thought about his own family, his parents, distant and disapproving when he'd chosen finance over their preferred path of medicine, his sister, whom he hadn't spoken to in 6 months after an argument he could barely remember, his nephew's birthday, which he'd missed last month because of a client dinner. When had he last prioritized family over work? "The Honda giving you trouble?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the car Elena had been working on. "Timing belt replacement," Elena said, warming. Slightly to the technical topic, "Mrs. Chen's had this car for 15 years, refuses to get rid of it, says it's reliable and she's not wrong. These old Accords, they'll run forever if you maintain them properly." Marcus found himself genuinely interested. "Is that your business mostly? Older cars?" "Mostly," Eleanor confirmed. "People in this neighborhood, they can't afford new cars every few years. They need their vehicles to last. We help them do that." She paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though occasionally we get a Porsche with a stressed-out owner." Marcus laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising both of them. "Fair point." Carlos chose that moment to emerge from the office, moving slowly but with dignity. "Elena, Mrs. Chen called. She's coming at noon, wants to know if the car will be ready." "Tell her yes," Elena said. Then, to Marcus, "I should get back to work." "Right, of course." Marcus started toward his Porsche, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" Elena looked up wary. "What? Why did you trust me yesterday? When I couldn't pay, you could have kept my car, called the cops, anything, but you just let me go." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. "You want the honest answer? Please." "Because you looked scared," she said simply, "not angry or trying to scam us, just scared and out of your depth. And I figured anyone that's scared is probably telling the truth." The observation was so accurate that Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, in a way he hadn't experienced since his early days in banking. "You read people well." "Mechanics have to," Eleanor said. "Half our job is diagnosing cars. The other half is figuring out if the customer's being straight with us or trying to get away with something." "And what did you diagnose about me?" Elena tilted her head, studying him openly. Guy, who's used to being in control, suddenly not in control, doesn't handle it well. Probably successful at whatever you do, but maybe success isn't making you as happy as you thought it would. The accuracy of her assessment left Marcus speechless. Elena seemed to realize she'd gone too far, because she softened her tone. But hey, I could be wrong. I'm better with engines than people. I don't think you are, Marcus said quietly. Wrong, I mean. They stood there in the morning light, the shop's bay door framing them like a portrait. The banker and the mechanic, two people from different worlds who'd collided by accident and found something unexpected in the collision. Carlos cleared his throat meaningfully. Elena started slightly, as if remembering where she was. I really should get back to Mrs. Chen's timing belt. Yeah. Marcus moved toward his car, then turned back one more time. Elena, thank you. For yesterday, for today, for being decent when I wasn't. Elena's smile was genuine now, reaching her eyes. You're welcome, Marcus. Try not to stress out your brakes again. Marcus drove away from Rodriguez's auto. Repair for the second time, but this time was different. In his rearview mirror, he saw Elena return to her work, saw Carlos pat her shoulder affectionately, saw the morning sun hit the faded sign and make it glow. The shop looked beautiful to him now, not despite its worn edges, but because of them. Those worn edges represented years of honest work, family dedication, a community served with skill and integrity. His phone buzzed with messages, Mitchell demanding an explanation, clients needing attention, the machine of his career grinding forward relentlessly. But Marcus didn't reach for the phone immediately. Instead, he drove slowly through the morning streets, really seeing Los Angeles for the first time in years. The taco stands opening for breakfast, the workers heading to construction sites, the mothers walking children to school, all the invisible people who made the city function while people like him pretended they were self-made. When Marcus finally arrived at his office, the glass tower gleaming in the morning sun, something had shifted inside him. He rode the elevator to the 35th floor, walked past his assistant's concerned greeting, and closed his office door. Only then did he sit at his desk and look out over the city spread below him like a map of his ambitions. He thought about Elena's hands, scarred and competent. He thought about the trust she'd shown him when she had every reason not to. He thought about the simple pride in her voice when she'd explained her work, her family, her place in the community, and he thought about his own hands, soft and weak, holding nothing more substantial than a phone and a pen. The realization of what was missing from his life crystallized with painful clarity, meaning beyond money, connection beyond transactions, respect earned through character rather than credentials. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Webb, Mr. Mitchell wants to see you immediately. Marcus looked at the phone, then out at the city, then down at his hands. Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes, he said. But first, he had something to do. He pulled out his phone and opened his messages. After a moment's hesitation, he began to type. The message was simple, but it represented a choice. The first of many he was about to make, each one leading him away from the person he'd been and toward the person he might become. Marcus hit send and stood. His reflection in the office window looked the same as always, but he felt different, humbled. Awake, the hardest conversations were still ahead, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt ready for them. The weeks following Marcus's encounter at Rodriguez Auto Repair unfolded with the inexorable momentum of a life-changing course. The meeting with Mitchell went exactly as badly as Marcus expected. Standing in his managing partner's office, all chrome and glass with a view that made the city look like a toy, Marcus weathered the storm of professional disappointment with surprising calm. You missed Henderson, Mitchell said, his voice ice-cold. Do you know what that cost us? What it cost you? I can imagine, Marcus replied. Can you? Mitchell leaned forward. Henderson went with Feldman and Associates. That's a $40 million portfolio, Marcus. Your commission alone would have been close to 500,000. The number should have devastated him. 6 months ago it would have. But standing there, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena's $380 repair bill and how she'd trusted him for it, about the gap between those two sums and what they represented. "I apologize for missing the meeting," Marcus said formally. "It was unprofessional." Unprofessional. Mitchell's laugh was harsh. "It was career suicide. I'm moving you off the senior accounts. You'll handle the smaller portfolios until you prove you're reliable again." Marcus nodded, accepting the demotion without protest. He should have felt humiliated, angry, ready to fight back. Instead, he felt oddly liberated. The machine of his ambition, which had driven him for 15 years, had finally broken down, just like his Porsche's brakes. And maybe that breakdown was exactly what he'd needed. That evening, Marcus did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He left the office at 5:30 p.m. His colleagues stared as he packed his briefcase, their expressions mixing confusion with contempt. In their world, leaving early was tantamount to surrender. Marcus didn't care anymore. He drove his Porsche south, away from West Hollywood and toward the neighborhood where Rodriguez Auto Repair sat waiting. The late October sun cast long shadows across the streets, and the evening rush had already begun. But Marcus didn't mind the traffic this time. He used it to think. Elena had mentioned that the shop stayed open until 7 p.m. on weekdays, late enough for working people to pick up their cars. Marcus arrived at 6:15, parking his Porsche next to a battered minivan that had seen better days. Through the bay window, he could see Elena working on the van's suspension, her movements as precise and confident as the first time he'd watched her. Carlos sat in the office as usual, but this time Marcus noticed he was helping a young mother fill out paperwork for her repair, explaining each line item with patient kindness. The woman looked stressed, counting bills from her purse with the careful attention of someone for whom every dollar mattered. Marcus waited until Elena finished lowering the minivan before approaching. She spotted him and straightened, surprise crossing her face. "Marcus? Something wrong with the Porsche?" "No, it's perfect," he said quickly. "I actually came to talk to you." Elena wiped her hands on her rag, wariness replacing surprise. "About what?" This was harder than Marcus had anticipated. Standing in the shop's harsh fluorescent lighting, with grease and oil smells surrounding them, he suddenly felt foolish. What was he even doing here? But he'd started this, so he pushed forward. "I wanted to ask if you'd have dinner with me," he said, "as a thank you for fixing my car and for being honest with me when I needed it." Elena blinked, clearly not expecting this. "Dinner? Nothing fancy," Marcus added quickly. "Just dinner. Maybe that taco place next door, if you'd recommend it." A slow smile spread across Elena's face. "You want to buy me tacos? If you're free." Marcus felt like a teenager asking someone to prom. All his boardroom confidence evaporated. "If not, I understand. Give me 10 minutes to wash up and close out the register," Elena interrupted. "And yes, the tacos next door are the best in Los Angeles." Those 10 minutes felt eternal. Marcus waited in the parking lot, second-guessing everything. What was he doing? Elena was a mechanic, from a completely different world than his. They had nothing in common. This was crazy. But when Elena emerged from the shop's bathroom wearing clean jeans and a simple green blouse, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in a ponytail, Marcus's doubts evaporated. She looked beautiful, not in the polished way of the women he usually dated, but in a natural, unaffected way that made his chest tight. "Ready?" she asked. They walked to the taco stand, a tiny establishment called La Estrella that was already filling with evening customers. The owner, a heavy-set man in his 50s, greeted Eleanor with obvious affection, and they exchanged rapid Spanish that Marcus couldn't follow, but he caught his name mentioned, and the owner's eyebrows rose comically as he looked between them. Jorge thinks you're my boyfriend, Elena said with amusement as they found a table outside, plastic chairs on cracked concrete that somehow felt more real than any upscale restaurant Marcus had been to. I told him you're a customer. He said customers don't usually ask mechanics to dinner. Smart man, Marcus said. They ordered, Elena handling it in Spanish, and soon steaming plates of carne asada tacos arrived, accompanied by fresh lime and homemade salsa that looked dangerously spicy. Marcus followed Elena's lead, building his taco with precise movements. So, Elena said, biting into her taco with obvious enjoyment, what's really going on here, Marcus? What do you mean? You show up at my shop? Ask me to dinner, you're not wearing a suit for the first time since I've known you. She gestured at his button-down and slacks with her taco. Something's different. Marcus took a bite of his own taco, buying time. The flavors exploded in his mouth, rich, spicy, perfectly balanced. This is incredible, he said. Don't change the subject. He set down his taco and met her eyes. I got demoted today. Missed an important meeting because of the car trouble, and my boss moved me off senior accounts. Eleanor's expression shifted to concern. Marcus, I'm sorry. That's the best thing that could have happened to me, Marcus finished. I think. Now Elena looked confused. The best thing? Can I ask you something? Marcus leaned forward. When you work on cars, do you ever feel like you're making a difference? Not just fixing an engine, but actually helping someone. Elena considered the question seriously. Every day, she said. Mrs. Chen, whose Honda I was working on this morning, she's a home health aide. She visits elderly patients who can't leave their houses. If her car breaks down, those people don't get their care. So yeah, when I fix her car, I'm helping. See, that's what I realized, Marcus said, the words coming faster now. I've spent 15 years moving money around, making rich people richer. I'm good at it, or I was, but I can't point to a single person whose life is better because of what I do. I can't name one thing I've contributed that actually matters. Elena was quiet for a moment, studying him with those intelligent brown eyes. So, what are you going to do? I have no idea, Marcus admitted, but I know I can't keep living the way I have been, working 80-hour weeks, chasing promotions, measuring my worth by my bank balance. It's hollow, Elena. It's all hollow. That's a big realization, Elena said softly. I owe it to you, Marcus said. Watching you work, seeing your pride in what you do, the way your father looks at you. That's what's been missing from my life. Purpose, connection, something real. Elena reached across the table and put her grease-stained hand over his manicured one. The gesture was simple, but it sent electricity through Marcus's body. You know what I think, she said. I think you're scared, just like you were when you couldn't pay me. But this time, you're scared of the right things. What are the right things? Being mediocre, being meaningless, wasting the one life you get on things that don't matter. Elena squeezed his hand. Those are good fears to have. They finished dinner, talking about everything and nothing. Elena's childhood helping her father in the shop, Marcus's years of relentless ambition, their shared love of old cars, their different perspectives on success. The evening grew cool, and the streetlights flickered on, but neither of them wanted to leave. Finally, around 9, Elena checked her phone. I should get back. Dad'll want to know how this went. How what went? Marcus asked with a smile. Dinner with the stressed-out Porsche guy, Elena said, returning the smile. He's been speculating all week. All week, but I just asked you today. Marcus, Elena said gently, you've been back to the shop 4 times in 2 weeks, always with some question about the repair, always finding an excuse to talk. My dad's not subtle about his observations. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck. Was I that obvious? Adorably so, Elena said, and the word adorably made Marcus's heart skip. They walked back to the shop together, their pace slow. Elena's pickup truck sat alone in the parking lot now, Carlos having already gone home. Marcus's Porsche looked absurdly out of place next to it. "Can I see you again?" Marcus asked. "Not just here at the shop, I mean." Elena tilted her head, considering. "You want to date me?" "Yes," Marcus said simply, "if you'll let me. You know I'm not like the women you probably usually date, right? I don't do fancy restaurants or gallery openings. I work with my hands. I smell like motor oil half the time, and my idea of dressing up is clean jeans." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I'm asking." Elena smiled, that genuine smile that transformed her whole face. "Okay, Marcus, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, no changing who you are to impress me. If this works, it's because we're being real with each other. Second, I don't have time for games. I work 60 hours a week, and my free time is precious. So if you're going to pursue this, you're going to be honest about what you want." "What I want," Marcus said slowly, "is to learn how to be the person I saw reflected in your eyes that first day. Someone who values the right things. Someone who works with purpose. Someone who deserves respect because of who they are, not what they own." Elena reached up and touched his face gently, her calloused fingers rough against his cheek. "That's a lot to put on dinner and some conversation." "I'm not asking you to fix me," Marcus said. "I'm asking you to let me be around you while I fix myself." "Well," Elena said, "when you put it like that." She kissed him quick and soft, there and gone before Marcus could process it. Then she stepped back, grinning at his stunned expression. "Text me," she said, climbing into her pickup. "Maybe we can do this again." Marcus watched her drive away, the old truck's taillights disappearing into the Los Angeles night. He stood in the empty parking lot for a long time, his hand touching his cheek where Elena's fingers had been. The next weeks unfolded like a revelation. Marcus continued working at the bank. Bills still needed paying, but his heart was no longer in it. Instead, he found himself at Rodriguez Auto Repair during his lunch breaks, watching Elena work and learning the names of her regular customers. Mrs. Chen, whose Honda held together through Elena's careful maintenance. Mr. Torres, whose construction company depended on his fleet of pickup trucks. The young couple with a newborn who could barely afford their minivan's repairs, whom Elena always found a way to help. Marcus started bringing lunch for Elena and Carlos, sitting in the shop's small office while they ate and talked. He learned about Carlos's journey from Mexico, about Elena's mother who died when Elena was 16, about the dreams they'd built together in this shop. "My father wanted me to be a doctor," Elena told him one afternoon, grease on her nose from a particularly difficult transmission job. "Said I was too smart to be a mechanic, but I never felt smarter than when I'm diagnosing an engine, figuring out what's wrong and making it right again. That's its own kind of medicine, isn't it?" Marcus thought about his own parents' disappointment when he'd chosen finance. But unlike Elena, he hadn't chosen something he loved. He'd chosen something lucrative. The difference felt profound. He began staying later at the shop, helping with simple tasks, organizing parts, cleaning tools, updating their ancient computer system. Elena protested at first, but Marcus insisted. "I need to be useful," he told her. "Let me be useful." One Saturday in November, Marcus arrived at the shop in old clothes instead of his usual pressed khakis. "Teach me," he said to Elena. "Teach you what?" "How to work on cars. I want to learn." Elena stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." So Elena taught him, starting with the basics. How to change oil, replace filters, check fluid levels. Marcus was terrible at first, his soft hands clumsy with tools, his knowledge of engines purely theoretical, but he persisted, driven by something deeper than mere interest. He was learning a language he'd never spoken, the language of building and fixing, of making things work with your hands. "You're getting better," Elena said one December afternoon, watching him successfully replace brake pads on a Toyota Camry. "Still slow, but better." "High praise from you," Marcus said with a grin, his hands covered in brake dust. Elena moved closer, taking his hand in. hers, and examining the developing calluses on his palms. "These tell a story," she said softly, "about someone willing to learn, someone willing to change." Marcus looked at his hands, no longer soft and weak, but starting to show the marks of real work. They'd never be as scarred and capable as Eleanor's, but they were becoming something real. "I've been thinking," he said, not looking at her, "about leaving the bank." Eleanor's hand tightened on his. "That's a big decision. I know. But I've been doing research, looking into automotive technology programs, maybe getting certified as a mechanic." He finally met her eyes. "I know I'll never be as good as you, but maybe I could be useful. Maybe I could open a shop somewhere, help people the way you help them." "Marcus, I'm not doing this because of you," he interrupted. "Or not only because of you. I'm doing it because for the first time in my adult life, I actually want to go to work. I want to learn this. I want to be the kind of person who fixes things instead of just shuffling money around." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, that beautiful, genuine smile that had first made Marcus's heart skip. "You know what? I believe you." The winter passed in a blur of oil changes and late-night conversations, of Marcus learning and Elena teaching, of two people from different worlds building something new together. Marcus gave notice at the bank in February, enduring Mitchell's contempt and his colleagues' bewilderment. He enrolled in an automotive technology program at the community college where Eleanor had studied, spending his days in class and his evenings at Rodriguez Auto Repair. His parents called it a midlife crisis. His sister called it insanity. His former colleagues called it career suicide. Marcus called it waking up. On a warm April evening, 7 months after that first grinding sound had brought him to Rodriguez Auto Repair, Marcus stood in the shop bay with Elena and Carlos, all. 3 of them oil-stained and tired from a long day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that filtered through the bay doors. "I have a proposition," Marcus said, his voice uncertain in a way that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "And you can absolutely say no." "What kind of proposition?" Carlos asked, his English much clearer now that Marcus had been spending time learning Spanish from him. Marcus pulled out a folder, not from his briefcase, which he'd sold months ago, but from his backpack. Inside was a business plan, carefully researched and thoughtfully constructed. "I want to invest in the shop, not take it over," he added quickly. "Partner with you. We could expand, hire another mechanic, maybe get newer equipment, stay in this neighborhood, keep serving the same community, but with more capacity to help people." Elena and Carlos exchanged glances. "Marcus," Elena said carefully, "that's generous, but—" "I'm not being generous," Marcus interrupted. "I'm being selfish. This shop, working here with you both, it's the first thing in my life that's felt meaningful. I want to be part of it. Really part of it, not just the guy who hangs around and watches you work." "How much are we talking about?" Carlos asked, ever practical. Marcus named a figure, significant, but nowhere near what he'd have spent thoughtlessly a year ago on a weekend trip or a new watch. "It's enough to really make a difference. New lift, updated computer system, maybe hire someone part-time, but only if you want it. This is your legacy, your dream. I'd just be an investor who occasionally gets his hands dirty." Eleanor looked at her father. They had a whole conversation in that glance, years of partnership and understanding flowing between them. Finally, Carlos nodded. "We accept," Elena said, "but on one condition." "Name it." "Your name goes on the sign," she said, "not just Rodriguez. Rodriguez and Webb Auto Repair. You're going to be a real partner." "Marcus, that means real responsibility." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. To have his name on that faded sign, to be part of this legacy, this dream, it meant more than any corner office ever had. "Deal," he managed. They shook hands formally. Then Carlos pulled Marcus into a tight hug, clapping him on the back with surprising strength. "Welcome to the family," he said in Spanish. and Marcus understood every word. That night, Marcus and Elena sat on the hood of his Porsche in the shop's parking lot, looking up at the stars that were just barely visible through LA's light pollution. The city hummed around them, cars passing, music drifting from nearby restaurants, the constant pulse of urban life. "You know," Elena said, "when you first showed up here with your grinding brakes and your attitude, I never would have guessed this is where we'd end up." "What did you think?" Marcus asked. "That you were another entitled rich guy who'd be gone as soon as your car was fixed." She paused. "I'm glad I was wrong. I'm glad you trusted me," Marcus said. "That day when I couldn't pay, you could have made things so much harder. But you chose to believe in me. Nobody had done that in a long time." Eleanor took his hand, their fingers intertwining, her calluses against his growing ones, the texture of two lives meeting in the middle. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said. "I think you needed that breakdown more than you needed the repair." "The car or me?" "Both," Elena said with a laugh. "Sometimes things have to break before they can be fixed properly." Marcus thought about that. About his Porsche's grinding brakes that had led him here, about the breakdown of his career that had forced him to rebuild, about the breaking open of his heart that had let new things grow there. Elena was right. Some breaks were necessary, surgical, the first step toward becoming whole. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for fixing me." "I didn't fix you," Elena corrected gently. "You fixed yourself. I just held up the mirror so you could see what needed work." They sat there as the evening deepened into night, two people who'd collided by accident and found purpose in the collision. The Porsche beneath them was just a car now, beautiful and well-maintained, but no longer a statement or a shield. It was a tool, a machine that Marcus finally understood on a fundamental level. Above them, the sign for Rodriguez and Webb Auto Repair, freshly painted, bright and hopeful, swayed slightly in the evening breeze. And somewhere in the distance, another car with a grinding problem navigated the streets of Los Angeles, headed toward a breakdown that might just save a life. The city turned, indifferent and immense. But in that small parking lot with grease under their fingernails and oil on their clothes, Marcus and Elena had found something rare and precious, a purpose worth holding on to, a person worth learning from, and a future worth building with scarred but capable hands. Sometimes the best things in life came from the worst moments. Sometimes you had to insult a filthy mechanic to discover she was exactly what you needed. And sometimes the grinding sound that brought you to your knees was actually the sound of your life finally starting to move in the right direction. Marcus smiled, pulled Elena closer, and looked up at the stars. Tomorrow, there would be engines to diagnose and lives to help, and 1,000 small acts of service that added up to something meaningful. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The Porsche's brakes were perfect, and so was everything else.